Good morning, everyone, or actually afternoon this time, and welcome to another episode of Charlotte County Through the Decades. If you can believe it, we are now in the 1960s, so we are, again, as I said last time, kind of crossing that halfway mark in our history of Charlotte County and highlighting certain events that have happened over the decades. So today we are at the Port Charlotte Library. Some of viewers might recognize this space. This is the second floor level, the children's and teens level. And we are here because I want to talk to you today about the history of the Port Charlotte Library. And I think it's appropriate, right, next month, this library is celebrating 60 years as a public library here in Port Charlotte, and the library is also finishing up a renovation of the first floor. So we have all of these great things that are coming together here in Port Charlotte. So I thought it was the perfect time to talk about all of this. Now, if you watched my video last time, you recall that we were talking about the onset of development in what is now Port Charlotte, right? I went through with you about the Mackle Brothers and General Development Corporation. We talked about A.C. Frizzell. We talked about all of those things. So today we're just moving just a little bit forward in that timeline to 1961. And so you have these early retirees that are moving to this new Port Charlotte development, right, that we talked about last time. And, you know, the brochures, if you look at those brochures and you look at the newspapers, they are promoting, you know, the fact that you're near the water, they're promoting outdoor living, all of these lovely things. But it turns out that folks want more than that, right? Folks who come here, people who are retiring here, they don't just want the beach. They don't just want golf or things of that nature. They want culture. They want activities. They want something to keep their brain active. And I think we can all relate to this, right? All of us today in our daily lives, I'm sure, do something, some sort of activity that keeps us active, whether that's word search puzzles or whether it's reading books or attending plays, whatever that may be. And the folks in the 1960s felt the same way. And so what you're going to see is this grassroots movement to open up an adult learning center, an adult education center, and a public library. And this is not the first public library or the first library in Charlotte County, and perhaps we can talk about that at another time. But for this new development, this is important, right? Because people want amenities. Specifically, they want cultural amenities. So in 1961, you have a small storefront library. And I know this sounds kind of funky today, but a storefront library that opens here in Port Charlotte. And this is the very first location of the Port Charlotte Library. Now, I have a bunch of the city directories with me from the 1960s. And I know throughout my videos I talked to you about primary sources that I've used to put these videos together. I've talked about the newspapers and even some oral histories. These directories are fascinating. It takes a little bit of, you know, understanding and a little bit of work to understand how they were set up. A lot of us today maybe don't know about directories, and especially the young people maybe listening, right, are probably like, what's a city directory? Right, I just Google things on my phone. Well, for the young folks out there, right, city directories in the 1960s would tell you the location, the addresses of businesses. So in 1961, you have Port Charlotte U, which is located at 610 Tamiami Drive South. Port Charlotte U. So this is Port Charlotte University. This and this is kind of the fun nickname that is given to this adult education center. And the library is part of this. And this library is, again, a grassroots movement that receives donations from the public. Monetary donations to buy supplies, you know, shelving, right? If you look around us today, you know, where do we get the shelving? Where do we get the tables, the chairs, right? In the 1960s, they are putting forward public donations. People living in these early developments of Port Charlotte are coming together and donating money. They're donating books. And it becomes very, very popular. So much so that only a year later, right, in 1962, the Port Charlotte Public Library has outgrown its little mini storefront and now has to relocate. Now, Port Charlotte U is going to stay at its location at 610 South Tamiami Trail, or Tamiami Drive as it was called at the time. But the library is going to eventually move here. Oh, and that's the wrong, of course, that's the wrong directory here. Oh no, 1963, or 62 rather. Sorry, we have so many directories and so many things here. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. All right. So Tamiami Drive South, we now have a listing for the Port Charlotte Public Library at 544D Tamiami Drive South. 544D Tamiami Drive South. The Port Charlotte U is still listed as 610 South Tamiami Drive South, right? So you can see here they're now expanding into these different spaces, and their collection is growing, and that's part of the reason that they have to expand. If we think about libraries today, and libraries 100 years ago, for example, right, library buildings have to grow over time. There's only so much space. If a library, an old library, say 100 or 120 years ago, maybe is the size of this room up here, but 50, 75, 100 years later, this does not suit an entire community, right? And here in Charlotte County now, we are fortunate we have 4 libraries, right? So imagine how many books are needed to fill all of those shelves. So 1961, the first library opens. 1962, they move to a second location, striking out on their own. And then in 1963, they're going to move again. So we have the third location in 3 years. And by 1963, the reason that they have to move is because of the community and because of this grassroots outreach to get books and to get this system underway. By 1963, the Port Charlotte Public Library has over 5,000 books. And I want you to keep in mind, unlike today, where right, the library system, right, we have a purchasing system, right? So books are donated to various friends groups. Maybe some of you watching participate in that, and that's wonderful. But the books on the shelves, these are purchased, right? The library system, the county purchases them for the library for patrons. In 1963, that system, that doesn't exist yet, right? So people are literally donating and accumulating this material, and so once again, they need to relocate. They're not going to go far, and in fact, these 3 locations, 1961, 62, 63, are literally within a stone's throw of each other. Now this is we don't have the 1963 directory, but we do have the 1964 directory. And in 1964, we now have an entry for the Port Charlotte Public Library at 635A Sunnydale Plaza, Tamiami Drive North. Now, for those of you that have lived in Port Charlotte for a long period of time, you may recognize some of these addresses or some of these names that I'm throwing out at you. Some of this does not exist anymore. I did find out that Sunnydale Plaza does exist in name, so presumably what I have found is the original location of that Sunnydale Plaza, and I'm gonna hold up a little map, a Google map here. Hopefully you all can see it, okay? And you can see I've highlighted at the bottom the original locations of the Port Charlotte Library and Port Charlotte U in 1961-62, and then in 1963, the Port Charlotte Library moves across the way to 635A Tamiami Drive North, the Sunnydale Plaza. And I was doing a little bit of research on this and found some information from a recording that was put together on the 50th anniversary of the library in 2011. And according to that recording, they were able, because of volunteers, because of community assistance, they were able to move that entire collection of over 5,000 books in 4 hours. So one day, 4 hours, and they got it all moved. So again, I think when we think about libraries, and we think about the Port Charlotte Library, we think about the community coming together and the importance of having cultural materials for both the people that are retiring here, but then as the decades go on, right, families and their children as well. Now, the Sunnydale Plaza location is going to work well for the Port Charlotte Library for about 5 years. So unlike the first couple of years where it's literally moving locations every year, Sunnydale Plaza works well until 1968. And in 1968, General Development Corporation, you remember our friends from our last video, who have, right, mixed reputations, and we don't have time to talk about that now, perhaps in another video, right? But they are going to donate 3 acres of land between Aaron and Gertrude Streets, right where we're standing now. They donate 3 acres of land, and that becomes what is today's Charlotte County Cultural Center complex. Originally, there's just one cultural center building and the library building. The area later expands to 8 acres, which is what it is today, and about 11 different extensions. So this facility, both what we're standing in, but also the facility at large in terms of the cultural center, has grown and has evolved over time, and has grown and evolved to suit the needs of this community. So if we go to the 1969 directory, and the format has changed just a little bit, but here we are, Aaron Street Northwest, Port Charlotte, from Tamiami Drive North, northwest of North Harper Boulevard, zip code 33950. I think the zip codes have changed just a little bit since then to account for population. But here we are, 801 Aaron Street, Charlotte County Cultural Center, to include the Adult Education Association of Charlotte County. That's the old Port Charlotte U, so they've kind of changed the name a little bit. Or they've added on. It's still Port Charlotte U, but then they have kind of this separate adult education part of it. Charlotte County Library Headquarters. So the library headquarters for Charlotte County were actually here. And then the Port Charlotte Public Library, right? Port Charlotte Public Library, and then Port Charlotte U. So we've gone in 7 years from a small storefront a library, right? Just think of any little shopping center you've ever been in, and imagine going into a hair place or a 7-Eleven or a Subway. That was the library in 1961, and by 1968 we have this cultural center for Charlotte County to include a theater, adult education, the library, all of these things that are still with us today. And just some information, since we're here and talking about this transformation of culture in Charlotte County, just a little bit of information on the cultural center. So it was originally the idea of 25 residents who saw a need for a center for adult education and culture, right? And again, this is people who had amenities, cultural amenities, where they came from, and they were looking for that same thing here, right? And I mentioned about donating the 3 acres of land in the middle of the development, right? So if you look at this area today, it is surrounded by the original heart of what was Charlotte County, and that was done on purpose. So in a sense, the cultural center today and the Port Charlotte Library, this complex, this functions as a little cultural downtown of Port Charlotte. And so this is really the heart of that original Port Charlotte. And since 1968, there have been 11 additions, and eventually, again, as I said, it expanded to over 8 acres. The Adult Education Center, the first chairman was James Baldwin. 13 subjects were originally offered to 250 residents for a registration fee of $2 in 1961. The first graduation class was 29 students whose average age, 64. By 1963, a full 43 courses were being offered, with 4 of them accredited by Edison Junior College. And one of the most popular classes was the art class. So again, you have these people who have retired, and they want to enjoy their retirement, but they don't just want to sit around and do nothing. They want to be involved, and they want to have activities. And I think this really is important for us to remember, because I think if you look at those GDC brochures on their take them at their surface value, and you see pictures of golf and waterfront, and everybody's outside with lemonade and lawn chairs, right? And that's lovely, and that is certainly one of the reasons people came here. But I think if we look a little bit deeper and we look at the Port Charlotte Library, we look at the Port Charlotte, or the Port Charlotte U and now the Cultural Center, right? It clearly tells us that people wanted more and they were able to get more, right? And these facilities are still serving the public today. Right, just very soon, once the renovation here at Port Charlotte Library is complete, you'll be able to enjoy a near brand new facility, at least on the inside. So I hope that this has been of interest to some of you, especially those of you that have been around here in Charlotte County for a long period of time, and even our newcomers as well, to learn about the facilities that you use perhaps on a regular basis. Next month, 1970s. Not quite sure what we'll be tackling, but somebody did request a little bit of information on Rotunda, so perhaps we'll tackle that. Until then, see you next time.